Okay, no problem. Let me move this around. How do you start this up? I mean, I know this is a key. Oh, what? Today I'm driving a 2000 Saab 93 Viggen. A cool, quirky, crazy, rare Saab. And I'm going to review it. So, what do we have in here? It's a very special car, a very quirky special car. This is probably the most quirky vehicle I have ever reviewed. A 2000 Saab 93. This is a sedan version with a bit of a hatchback style at the same in the back. The owner was kind enough to allow me to borrow this for the day, show you what it's all about, and take it for the first time for a test drive. This is also for sale, so in case if you are interested in purchasing this very clean example, well, don't forget to check out the link in the description below. But for now, let's start talking about the Saab company and why this thing is so cool. Since 2016 or so, Saab completely shut down their automotive manufacturing plants, and very few of these models are left out there. But I'd say the market is still very alive, and I think there is still sort of like a desire to own these vehicles because they were very special. The company cared for reliability, they cared for safety. They were the first one to invent a lot of things, and the first ones to have standard seat belts. Yes, Saab invented quite a lot of features for vehicles, and another one they did invent that I could recall was the actual headlight washer in the front with the wipers. Yes, this car, it's got an amazing history. But the brand itself has also been through some troubles. They were owned by GM, of course, with their beautiful reputation for financial responsibility, and another company was Spyker, which was another Dutch company that tried to sort of take over the brand, the Saab brand, and bring it to the mass market, but they were unable. Now, there's some words about the relationship between GM and Saab. Maybe it was to do with sales, hence why the whole thing just fell apart. Or there are some other rumors that say that GM wanted to design these cars to their own, let's say, terms, and while Saab cared a bit more about safety, they cared about the reliability of this car. Let's just say it wasn't the perfect marriage. Some of the innovations of Saab are the GT750 is the first Saab car fitted with the seat belts as standard. In 1963, Saab becomes the first volume maker to offer diagonally split dual brake circuits. In 1969, they create the ignition system near the gear stick. In 1970, they introduced the world's first headlamp wipers and washers. In 1971, they introduced heated front seats, and the first time in the world they're fitted as standards. The list goes on and on and on. They also offered in 1981 the split field side mirror, which this one is actually equipped as well. It reduces the driver's blind spot. All the way to 1991, it developed a Trionic engine management system equipped with the 32-bit microprocessor. And the last one that they invented was back in 2008 when they introduced the cross-wheel drive, an advanced all-wheel drive system with the ELSD. Saab brands the system as the XWD. The list of the innovations from Saab is very, very, very long. Now, the model that we have for today's video isn't just the 93 Saab, it's actually the Viggen, and I've tried to Google the name and pronounce it correctly, but that is the closest I can get to. Viggen, it sounds like vegan, you know, the people that You know the deal, right? But in this case, this style, it is similar to what BMW offers with their M division. So Viggen, it's kind of like the M division of Saab. And this is one of those, let's just say, an M3 competitor in many ways. But this is, of course, a 4-door and a 5-seater. Next thing I want to talk about is the design of this car. This thing is super unique. What do I mean with that? Well, first of all, let's just look at the side profile. It looks like a sedan. It is a sedan. It looks like a hatchback, but it's not a hatchback. It's got a whole mix of designs, like especially this part over here. In most sedans, you would find sort of the rear windshield flat and, of course, the trunk. This doesn't have that. This is a full windshield in the back. And then you look at the pillars as well. Totally different what you find in a standard sedan. The wheels, unique design to the Saab 93. Then you move on to the door handles. That's another quirk about this, the way these are designed in comparison to other vehicles that they have sort of flat. This is more curvy. Moving on to the bottom part over here where it gets even more interesting. You see the vehicle has the side skirts, but underneath the side skirts you have two covered area where you can use for the actual jack. So you can insert the jack there to lift the vehicle and change the tires. So you have two on each side. Another unique design to this, which is also very flawless. Now, another vehicle that I've seen that is, of course, the W210. But in the W210, they were super visible and they were round. And here, they're a bit more discreet. And then you move on to the side mirrors, so specifically the passenger one, you have a split side mirror. Why is that? Well, it gives the driver better visibility. Think of this as sort of like a fisheye. The one that you see on the driver's side was actually modified by the previous owner, but the idea is pretty much the same for the other side. It's just that that one came with it. It wasn't just an aftermarket. Back to the door handle. First of all, you notice the design, of course, similar to the other side, but what's important is this little cover on top of the key insert. So in this case, if, for example, the power didn't work, the power control unit for the doors didn't work, you had to insert the key, but they covered it so in case with time, it doesn't get rusted. With little details. It also comes with a separate fob. What you see in here is the key fob, but it is separate from the actual key, unlike new cars. This looks more like an airplane joystick. Look at the design of this thing. Look at that. To make sure that people on the road knew that this wasn't just a standard 93, this was a Viggen, well, they included a badge on the side, and this is similar to what you'd find, for example, in the BMW M's or even Mercedes AMG. The front end design is another thing to absolutely love about this car, because if you look at the headlights all the way through, they're designed with the same size as the grille with the Saab logo in the front, which is something else that you realize about the design of this car. Everything sort of matches. On top of that, as we talked about the fact that they were the first one to introduce the wipers for the headlights with sprinklers as well onto the sides, you can tell that these are actually functional because the owner made sure that this car was as original as possible. The next thing you notice with this is that underneath here for the intercooler, you have the grille, which in most cars is plastic. In this one, it is actually metal. On top of that, it does have fog lights, but what it does have for a 2000 car is corner lights. What does that mean? Well, when you turn on the indicator left or right, one of these would work. And the owner said that he didn't know until today when we filmed the rollers for the car, because I was the first to notice when he was turning left and right. I noticed that these were turning on at the same time. Now, another way to tell that this is the Viggen version is the fact that it has this massive spoiler at the top for better downforce, because this vehicle is the front-wheel drive, so kind of needs a little bit of that downforce on the rear sides. Another thing to notice about this is the fact that this does have an actual windshield wiper, and unlike most vehicles, which have it in the center, this has it on the left side, so that way it's able to clean most of the area needed for better visibility. Now, let's talk about something even cooler. Now, I've said this before, the new cars are getting bigger on the outside but smaller on the inside, and here's one perfect example from 2000s. First of all, let's pop the trunk with the remote control. It opens, and that is pretty heavy, but if you look carefully, I kid you not, this is probably the biggest trunk I have seen on any car from this time, or even a new car for that matter. It's unbelievable how huge this trunk is, shockingly. Another thing to notice with this is that it has a handle at the top, which is something you see in other vehicles. But what's even more important is the fact that this has a reflector. So when you open this at night, the people driving towards you, they know you have the trunk open. And after you close the trunk, you wait for a second. A bit more than a second. It locks automatically. That's pretty cool. Now, in most sedans, you can fold the seats 60-40. Sometimes they are split, sometimes they're not. This one, it's a bit different. Oh, also that was the trunk locking automatically. You can fold all of them at the same time because you have this bar at the top that holds the seats together, and it also comes with a spot for your skis right in here. Of course, Saab wouldn't make this car just like another performance vehicle. They had to go a step further, and in this case, for the side step, they've included two logos. You have the Viggen one, so the customer or let's say a passenger knows that this is a Viggen every time they get in. And you also have the Saab, which to make sure they know this is not just another Swedish company, this is a Saab. And of course, they had to make sure that these pins over here that show that the vehicle is locked don't look like just random tiny little pointy things. They actually look exactly like a thumb grabbing style. So put your thumb in it, you can lock it and unlock it. The full design here, it's quite impressive. And the weird designs and quirky design, if you want to call it that way, continues with the window switch located right at the bottom instead of up here. It's right there. When you jump inside, it gets even more quirky, including the design over here, which looks very much like a fighter jet. Now, why is that? Of course, Saab produces fighter jets, and hence why this is called Viggen, as sort of like a homage or respect to the F-34 Viggen fighter jet produced by Saab, and I believe Volvo at the same time. This has that similar design. You got the beautiful center area here, which very much looks like a fighter jet because the entire thing from the climate unit all the way to the stereo and the other controls, it's flat all the way through, including the left side. Even the steering wheel design is very much like an airplane style, though airplanes don't have a steering wheel, but the theme is around there. Next thing is, of course, that this is equipped with a 5-speed manual transmission, but it's not just that. You see, they want to make sure that you know how to put this thing in reverse, and they put these little arrows around the ring where you pull it up, and it tells you how to do it. Shows an arrow that you can pull it up to put it in reverse, and you know where the reverse is located onto the right side. It has very unique things like, for example, the cup holder, which is located right here. You press that and it pops out, something that you don't see as often nowadays. It only has one in the front, and I would pretty sure this wouldn't work with the current cups because the smaller back in 2000, now they're essentially disappeared, and we have extra large. There was the extra large back then. The smaller now, it was basically the extra large in 2000, and of course they've gotten even larger these days. Then you close that, there's more things to go through, like for example the climate unit has a digital screen in the center to show you everything, and on top of that this has a very unique way to start up. First of all, in most vehicles you'd find the key insert either on the right side of the steering column, or there's a push button on the right side of the dashboard. In the Porsche, you find them on the left side. The classic ones, you had the key to insert, the new ones have the key there all the time. Well, Saab had to make this a little bit different, and that's another thing I love about the cars of like 2000s or 1990, because they were not all the same. They were totally different from each other, unlike today that they look like a copy and paste. Saab did the opposite from everybody else. They put the key insert right in the center to start up your car, kind of like a fighter jet too. The next thing you gotta love about this car are the seats. You see, the Viggen one does have sporty seats in comparison to the standard 93 Saab, And they've made sure to include the badge located on top of the actual seat, not the headrest, the actual seat. And that includes the back seats as well, something that you don't really find in new cars as much. Now that you have the key inserted, how do you start it up? Well, first you press the clutch and you go all the way to the right side and you start the vehicle. But don't forget, this car is in reverse right now. And why is that? Well, it's very simple. If you turn it off and you want to remove the key, you have to do it with the car in reverse. You can't remove the key and walk away without having it in reverse. Like for example, you can't even change the gear. So you got to start it up, put it in neutral, and I'm gonna turn it off. Now, if I want to remove the key, you can't. So the best way would be is lift this, put in reverse, press the clutch, remove the clutch and the brake, and now you have the key. This is how crazy this car, and the reason they did that is to make sure that you left the car in reverse in case the handbrake fails. Now, this is an interesting one. Right now it's telling me replace the key battery. The screen over here tells you a lot of information, but what else it says is, in fact, if you have the actual key fob, if you have both of them at the same time, it will tell you that you have 2 key fobs in the car. In this case, the key fob needs the battery replaced. The next thing is this button over here called the night panel. So what that is, it's quite interesting. Let me show you. If you press that button, it basically does that. It turns off all the gauges, making sure that at night it doesn't bother you when you're driving, and it will stay the speed over here, the light, it will stay based up to the speed that you're driving. Little details that make this car very quirky. It also has a unique way of showing you that the doors are open. In this case, the front door is open. And this vehicle has 247,000 kilometers and still going strong. Continue with that fighter jet style are the switches in the center for the windows, the front windows and the rear side, and you have the lock option for the windows right in there. The little screen that you see at the top here shows quite a lot. Instead of having this in the actual cluster, they have included at the top of the CD player, and it shows a lot of information. So you got your average speed limit, you got your temperature, your tank to empty, I'm assuming distance to empty, and your average liters per 100 kilometers. Like just the little details that you don't see in other vehicles. Oh, and of course it does have a distance, it has your arrive, you got your alarm if you want to set the alarm, just the cool things that you see in a Saab. Now let's talk about the heart of this car. We got a 2.3 liter turbocharged 16 valves inline 4 engine. It makes about 230 brake horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. It is a front-wheel drive and it uses a 5-speed transmission. Now, one thing to know about these engines is the fact that it does have an issue that apparently is very repetitive. It is called the cassette injection, which is located right in the center. The owner says that a lot of Saab owners actually keep them when they drive around to make sure that it doesn't break down in the middle of the road, but you can replace it and it's very easy to replace. A few screws here and there and a couple of plugs over here and you're good to go. But another thing to love about this car is how it is designed overall. Like for example, it comes with a strut bar, which is something that you don't see it very often in some performance cars back in 2000. This has it and it goes all the way around. It also has an intercooler and of course a fan at the same time. Now the engine makes only 230 horsepower, but I have seen some videos where they can produce up to 300-400 horsepower easily with a few bolt-ons. But the overall quality of the engine, minus the little problem that I had, it's actually pretty solid. And one is the testimony right here, which is a 247,000 kilometers machine that when you pop the hood, doesn't even look like it has that many kilometers. I've seen cars with way less kilometers than this Saab that are in very poor condition. This one, on the other hand, super clean all the way around. Okay, let's start this up. AC is working. That is a giant seat belt buckle. Look at that. One thing I noticed, you got to be careful with the clutch because the foot gets stuck underneath. It's got very close pedals. The gears are so easy to use to shift, like from second to third. It really goes. The steering is light. The suspension is still very comfortable, very soft, not stiff. Visibility in this car is amazing. These windows are pretty large. The sitting position for me, it's a bit high. I have to say, I've never sat in a sedan that feels like this. It feels very high off the ground. I don't mind it, but I can see that some people might find it uncomfortable. It's unique. It's a totally different car in comparison to other sedans. This in many ways looks like a sportback, not even a sedan, but it's cool. It's just cool. It's just the way this thing drives, the way it looks on the inside. It's got power seats, it's got memory seats from 2000. You have heated seats. Like, that's just something you didn't see it as often. And you could find that on a Saab, which is even more insane. The gears are pretty easy to shift. Like, you can go from like first and second pretty quickly. It's got very easy clutch. The engagement point, it's like halfway, but it's not hard. Every time I drive one of these modern classics or classics, I find myself learning about it before I take it for a drive. This, on the other hand, it's actually very easy to learn for the first time. It's easy to use. It's got nice steering, very direct. The ride, it's slightly like a boaty ride, but not to the point that it gets uncomfortable. It's got power for a 2.3 liter. Now, mind you, 230 horsepower for a front-wheel drive back in 2000, that was a lot. That's not something to feel shy about it or embarrassed about it, because it was a lot back then. I mean, think about this way. A 2023 Civic Type R makes about 300, which is not far off. And this makes 258 pound-feet of torque. Lots of torque on this car. Brakes are still solid. I'm loving the gear shifter. It's pretty easy and soft to go through gears here. You put your foot down. There's not much of that slippage in the front when you put your foot down, like some front-wheel drives. I like this. I like how it drives. It's so different from any other vehicle I've driven. It's got its own unique driving style. Driving dynamics are different in this car. I can see why people like these. They have the power. I know they're front-wheel drive, but it doesn't feel like a front-wheel drive. A lot of front-wheel drive cars, they have so much power that every time you put your foot down, it kind of like spins a lot. This, on the other hand, doesn't do that. It's got great management for traction too. It's shocking to me that after 247,000 kilometers, this car doesn't feel like it has that many kilometers. That's a lot of kilometers for a car of this year. That just shows you how good this thing is built. The interior, it's not totally worn. I mean, I just reviewed a Maserati from 2006, and it had half of the kilometers of this thing, actually less than half of the kilometers of this thing, and it was completely worn on the inside. This, on the other hand, it's still pretty solid, I must say. I'm quite impressed. It has power all the way in all gears, all the time. You got the power. Third gear, the juice is there. You put your foot down and it just goes. The fourth gear, it's probably the max you'll use in this car. That's all it needs, because you're already at 100 kilometers on fourth gear. The fifth, it's most of the time useless. I enjoy driving this thing. And another thing I noticed, it's very quiet on the inside for a 2000 car. I have driven cars from 2000s that are very loud. You hear the road noise. Of course, different technology. This has a very well isolated interior. The noise isolation, it's pretty nice. I feel very honored that I actually have the ability to actually drive one of these, and I want to say thank you to the owner for letting me drive, but because it's one of those cars that you don't see every day. It's also one of those cars that you can't just go to a dealership to buy. It's got interesting history. The Swedes gave us IKEA, which I love. They gave us ABBA, which I absolutely love. They gave us the meatballs, which everybody loves, and I think they're just very creative in what they do, and this is one of those cars that shows their capabilities. I was never a fan of Volvos, I will admit, but this has got me closer to loving some of those Swedish cars. It's got an interesting, quirky design and features, and it's got an amazing history, and what Saab has given to the automotive industry, it's something that will go down in history, because their innovations have really changed the automotive industry for many, many reasons. And this is one of those cars that you got to really appreciate. I love this. I'm going to put my foot down a little bit into... Nice. I like this. I really do. And I also got to remember that when I turn this off, I got to leave it in reverse, otherwise I can't take the key off. So I do that, release the clutch, and there I go. Oh, and this turned on. Pretty cool.